So good afternoon. Welcome back from lunch. We have three papers in the session entitled for political economy. Very interesting papers, very much related to our region. And I find their implications on the prospects of our region very, very important. And we have 90 minutes for the whole session. So what we'll do is that we'll allocate 15 minutes plus or minus a few minutes for each paper, and then we'll have time at the end for the discussant, which happens to be me also, and open discussions for the attendees of the session. So we'll start by the first paper, the effect of international sanctions on the size of the middle class in Iran. A very, very interesting paper by Mohammad, Reza, and Nader Habibi. So you have 15 minutes, Mohammad.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to the session on political economy. Yeah, it's about sanctions and the size of middle class in Iran. It's a joint work with my colleague Nader Habibi. And I would explain the background on the importance of middle class in the context of literature on the effects of sanctions, and I would clarify what type of methodological approach we use to quantify the impact of sanctions, and also show you some evidence on the channels through which sanctions affect the size of middle class in Iran, and at the end concluding. Now, the focus on the middle class is very much emphasized in the literature on economic and sustainable development, because apparently this is a segment of society which consume and save, has saving, high consumption, and sometimes we call it the consuming class. They have a big investment appetite. Also, it is shown in the literature that the middle class is very much active in business formation in the private sector, and usually they also show strong pro-development attitudes. Last but not least, it is also said as a kind of part of population which is between the rich and the poor, and balancing the interests of these two extremes and increasing the political stability of a country, which at the end translates to a sustainable development. Now, the relevance of middle class in the case of Iran is very much discussed in the literature on political science, economics. We know they have been engaged in, again, entrepreneurship and startups in Iran activity in the past, in the recent times, especially on the sanctions. They were also part of this political, social revolution in Iran in 1979. The middle class, urban middle class, was very much active. After the revolution, we also see a big support for political reforms comes from urban middle class, election of President Khatami, and different type of political protests, women life freedom, and the events like that was very much occupied by the presence of middle class. So in that sense, we discuss how economic sanction affected this segment of society because of its critical role in the sustainable development of Iran. And these are the channels through which the sanction we suppose and suggest to affect the size of middle class, and provide evidence on the relevance of these channels, from impacts on economic growth, capital formation, value added of industry, on the import and export, the negative effect of sanction on that, and on the effects that the sanction exercise on informal employment by increasing vulnerable part of population. Now, to give you a visual trend of development of size of middle class in the last years in Iran, this is based on the definition of Kharas, which basically has an absolute approach to define the global middle class in different countries around the world, those who are earning or spending between $11 and $110 in purchasing power parity. So this is basically a part of population which is differentiated from vulnerable population. There's a common agreement on this lower threshold. Upper threshold, some stop at the 40, 50, but I guess this threshold of $11 basically is a critical threshold which differentiates the middle class, consuming class from vulnerable part of population. Now, after the end of Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s, we see an increasing trend of expansion of middle class in Iran, and there's a turning point after 2012, which basically the middle class in Iran shrink, and this is associated with international sanction imposed on Iran by Obama administration and later on by the Trump administration. Now the question is how the sanction affected the size of middle class, what was the impact of sanction on that, and basically to answer this question we use a counterfactual approach. It's a causal question. In order to basically say how sanctions were effective, we need to build a synthetic Iran, which were quite similar to the real Iran before the sanction. And once that we have constructed a counterfactual Iran, basically we are able to say what was the impact of sanction on real Iran. Now to give you a very quick background on that, sanctions, what type of sanction we mean. The sanction basically after 2012 was the highlight of all type of sanctions which were imposed on Iran, international sanction on the Iranian oil export, central bank, SWIFT bank sanctions, and all type of sanctions which later on exercised in Russia was first experienced on Iran. So in that sense, I shift to the methodology, which is called synthetic control method. Some of you might be familiar with that, but the logic is simple. As said, the purpose of synthetic control method is to build a counterfactual Iran which were similar to Iran before the 2012, not only on the side of middle class, but also on other characteristics such as governance, socio-demographic characteristics of Iran should match to that synthetic Iran. And the only difference between real Iran and synthetic Iran basically is the sanction which is imposed on Iran and not on the synthetic Iran. So to find the synthetic Iran, of course, we focus on a donor group from the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa, members of Islamic organization countries and OPEC countries to narrow our search for the synthetic Iran. And during this process, I also excluded countries which were already on the sanction, like Venezuela, and some other countries which were already experiencing conflict and violence. So we dropped these countries in order to have a kind of sample which is all right from not experiencing the same shock that Iran experienced. So this basically result to 19 countries which we search for the synthetic Iran from this sample. They are listed here, and from these 19 countries, we come to the 5 countries which are building the synthetic Iran, including Qatar, Tunisia, Nigeria, Azerbaijan, Malaysia. And the way that you see in the parentheses are based on the nested optimization procedure in the synthetic approach, which reduce or minimize the gap between Iran and synthetic Iran before the 2012 sanction on the side of middle class and other characteristics. Later on, we do this leave one out analysis in order to make sure that inclusion of any of these countries are not driving the result. And basically, our results are immune to exclusion of any of these countries from the sample. The outcome variable, as I said, is based on the Kharas definition of the middle class, those segment of population which are earning or spending between $11 and $110 in purchasing power parity per day. This is a part of the middle class. Later on, we do also, with a different threshold between $10 and $40, again from the website of our board in data on the database on the poverty, and the result to a larger scale is the same as using this threshold of Kharas. We do also include the covariates or predictors in order to have the good match between Iran and synthetic Iran. Part of these covariates are the middle class of selected years before 2012 sanction in order to increase the fit of the model. But also we include the demographic factors and socioeconomic factors, but also the governance. Governance is also important because one argument in the literature on the sanction is this socioeconomic outcome after the sanction, this poverty or middle class, reducing the size of middle class is not necessarily due to sanction because of corruption and things like that. And we also do this matching on the voice and accountability and control of corruption. We found out the real Iran and synthetic Iran are very close on these governance problems also before the sanction. So the difference that we see later on in the results is not due to the difference in the types of governance of Iran and synthetic Iran. Now the matching, you see Iran and synthetic Iran are very close on selected years before the sanction. So the numbers are quite good. This is what we want in the synthetic control. But the match is not only on that, the match is on those covariates. To a good extent, we see we are comparing apple with apple, not a different comparison. So in that sense, it's important to achieve. Of course, the matching is not always perfect, and this is the main result, right? So when we build the synthetic Iran, which is a dashed line, we do see that they follow the real Iran experience before the 2012 sanctions, so growing, and then after that, the synthetic Iran increased expansion of middle class after the 2012, while the Iran experienced a drop, and the gap between these two basically shows the causal impact of the sanction. On average, it is 11 percentage point reduction of middle class of Iran during the 2012 and 2019, 8 years. And later on, when we use the synthetic difference in difference, we found out also this average treatment effect on the treated country, namely Iran, is also a statistically significant high level. So it's not a matter of chance or thing like this. It's basically is what the sanction imply for Iran. So, and you can also look at these every year, single year after the sanction, and basically see the gap between middle class of Iran in percentage point. And the real Iran on average is 11 percentage point reduction for this period. But you see in some period, for example, 2019 on the Trump sanction, this effect was at its maximum level, 20 percentage point difference. In some years, like 2016 and 17, this has reduced a little bit because of the Iran deal with the West, and a little bit improvement of Iranian oil exports. But otherwise, we see the damage is significant. Now, this is a more demanding approach in the synthetic difference in difference estimator, which also verify the effects that I showed with the classic synthetic approach, is the average treatment effects, minus 11 percentage decline per year on average. And this is including covariates, excluding covariates, more or less the similar numbers, and statistically significant as well. So now, reference to the world value survey, just to bring also examples of how Iranian people think, not from our estimation, how the people answer this question of world value survey, to which income category you belong. So world value survey basically has this statistic 2005 and 2020. 2005 is the before the sanction, at the end of hard time period when the Ahmadinejad came to the power. As the president, 2020 is under the sanction, right? Is the time that at the early 2020, by the way, before the corona pandemic began in Iran, this survey conducted. And here we do see the responses, the subjective responses of the Iranian to this question, to which income group you believe you belong. 12% of them to decide 1 and 2, decide 3 to 7, which we define as the middle class, 78% believe, and the richer 8, 9, and 10, 8.6. 2020, after the sanction, under the sanction, the number of people who identify themselves vulnerable population increased significantly to 30%. And in contrast, the number of people who identify them as middle class decline, and the amounts of rich relatively stabilized. Probably is also declined, but they fall down, maybe part of the upper middle class. Or so we basically have evidence also in the paper that this reduction basically is a downward mobility, that means the middle class shifted down, and they building more people on the vulnerable population, or partly also migrated from country. The channels, we provide evidence in details in the updated version of paper that we look at decline in GDP per capita as a driving channel of reduction of middle class. Again, the outcome middle income has been used here. You see the gap, $3,600 on average for 2012 to 2019. This is the loss in income that Iran could have at the absence of sanctions. This is the synthetic control using the merchandise import as the outcome. Again, the difference is clear. The trade decline, the gross capital fixing, capital formation decline as well, substantially. This is a crucial player for economic growth and business formation, affecting the situation of middle class. The value added of industry in Iran also showed a decline, but the synthetic part see a better performance. We also look at the self-employment, which is a measure of informal employment. And while this was decreasing in real Iran, synthetic Iran, up to 2012, after 2012, we see this decreasing in Iran has stopped. It reversed, so we are seeing more people going building more informal employment, while the synthetic Iran continues decreasing trend. That also is another evidence of declining the size of middle class, increasing vulnerable population. Under this definition of self-employment, again, the World Bank provides these data on the vulnerable employment. Again, the similar picture also emerged by using the vulnerable employment. To conclude, basically the paper is very much focused on measuring the impact of sanctions on the size of middle class, something which were absent in this literature. There are papers which, of course, look at the sanction, the poverty, and sanction and inequality and things like this. But in the paper, we discuss why the middle class is so crucial for sustainable development. And it's very much important to trace its reaction to these sanctions, because the poor before the sanction, they stay poor after the sanction, and the rich also are quite resilient to the sanction. Maybe even they become even richer by finding the loopholes in the system and rent-seeking. But this is the middle class which basically suffer most. And we measure the size of this impact here. We also look at different robustness check, as is usual in classic synthetic method, in space plausible, in time plausible, to find out, whether this is the phenomenon in Iran or this can be also seen in other cases. We run out analysis to find out whether the result is sensitive to inclusion of a specific country in donor sample or not. Narrow income gap has been also used. All of them basically support the main results here. And we will also look at and provide evidence, the updated version of paper, on the relevance of other channels which can explain the situation of the middle class here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So we agreed we'll do the 3 presentations and then we'll do the discussions. And so the next paper is also an interesting paper entitled Politicians on the Board of Firm Directors in the MENA countries. Do connections affect confidence in business sales? This is by Hassan Gholipour, sorry, and Mohammad Reza also.
Thank you, Reza. Thank you so much for attending the session. My name is Hassan Gholipour Feriduni, but make it short, Gholipour, because my citation got problem in the Scopus, so I should make it my family shorten. So now my
the things they make you do to get more citations.
Actually suggested by Mohammad. So this paper is written by myself and Mohammad Reza Farzanegan, and it's a working paper. I really appreciate if you provide comments at the end. We put it as a working paper on the online, but hopefully we get good comments and submit to you. So in this paper, we want to examine the impact of political connection, which is very common in the MENA, on the firm's sentiment, right? Business confidence or sentiment. Sentiment is often measured by the company's manager or owners about the future's economic condition or about the sales, right? So we want to see whether those companies have political connections or politicians or ex-politicians on their board of governance, whether they have a stronger sentiment about the sale or not, right? It's a simple question, but never been tested in literature. This is the outline of my presentation. Okay, so as I mentioned, in this study, we want to examine the relationship between political condition and business sentiment. Sometimes they call it business confidence, sentiments, or expectation, measured by sale expectation for upcoming year in the MENA regions. And we also want to test the mediating impact of membership in business association, and we want to test whether political connection can affect the business sentiment through the business associations. Okay, according to Italian guy, Faccio. So is he or chair? So he's one of the pioneer scholars in this field. He defined that if one of its firm large shareholder or top officer is a member of parliament or a minister or is closely related to top politicians, is considered as a political connection. So literature shows a lot of benefit for the political connection. For example, receiving preferential access to credit or government contracts, so which can impact the firm's profitability, is obvious, and it has been. There are a lot of studies that shows that the political connection has impact on firms' innovations, pollutions, and productivities. And some of the studies also focus on the firm's profitabilities. In this study, we are not focusing on the tangible outcome like innovation, profitability. We are focusing on an intangible or psychological outcome of the managers and the owners of the firms, right? So what they expect about the future sale if they are connected to the government. The other contribution of our study is there are a lot of studies that examine the macroeconomic determinant of political on business sentiment. There are not many studies looking at the micro determinant of business sentiment. This is another contribution of our study. So why MENA region? MENA region, because over the last 20 years, there are a lot of privatizations happening, but at the end, most of the private company is run by the ex-government politicians, right? Or they call it crony capitalism. And the guy, Divan is the leading guy. He has a lot of studies in this field. But most of Divan guy studies is conceptual and theoretical, right? In this study, we want to do empirical analysis on this relationship. And why business confidence? Because business confidence is a key determinant of firms' operation and investment decision and long-term planning. So this is established in literature. Okay, so in terms of theoretical background, we follow Chen et al. 2010. Their studies is related to our work. So they focus on the impact of political connection on financial analyst earning forecast. So they found that, in simple, they found that those companies are connected to government or they have a political connections. Their financial analyst forecast is more accurate because they have internal information. So we utilize their studies as a background of our study. It's not exactly what we are doing, but is related to their work. And they publish, I think, in Journal of Finance, I guess, it's a top finance journal. And they developed two opposing views. One of them, they say that the forecast should be more accurate because they have more information. At the same time, they proposed the other prospect, and they say that those politically connected firms, they will have more difficulty to forecast the earning. So the link between political connection and business sentiment can be positive or negative or either insignificant. We developed two hypotheses. The first one is the manager and owners of political connected firms tend to have higher level of confidence in the development of the future sale. And the second one, we say that membership in business associations, which are more related to the government, can mediate this link between political connection and business sentiment. We use the data from enterprise server of the World Bank. I'm sure you're familiar with that. They have a very rich data set at country level and across so many countries over the time. Our data is collected from 9 Middle Eastern countries from 2018 to 2022. I know two of these sample countries are affected by COVID, but we wanted to increase the sample size, so we include them in our model, in our analysis. By the way, our data set is not cross-section, is cross-section, is not longitude. We are not tracking individual firms over the time. And why this 9? Because of the data availability. Okay, how we measure the expectation? In a World Bank Enterprise Survey, there is a question. They ask the top manager or the owner of the firms, considering the next year, are this establishment total sale expected to increase, decrease, or stay the same? If they say that increase, we give them 1. If they say it's the same, we give 0 and decrease negative. And we remove those firms that they do not answer this question. So our sample is slightly reduced. So 49% of that expect to an increase in their sale for next year. The explanatory variable of interest is firms' political connection. In the survey, they ask whether you have any politician in the past in the firm's board of directors. So yes, no, and don't know. So we remove those items that do not answer. And 7.7% of firms have a political connection in our sample. And in terms of benefit of business association, we use the questions that they asked, what is the benefit that you get if you are a member of business associations? And it's measured in a 4 Likert scales, 1 not at all, 4 very useful. So the benefit including the influencing regulatory decision process or lobbying, accessing to the market information, accessing to the regulations as well. And we control a large number of variables that affect business sentiment, including the internal factors like a firm size, firm age, and the R&D expenditures, the gender of the top management, because it matters when they respond to the survey, and also the external factors, like how they perceive the obstacle in the whole economy and the country-specific factors. This is the descriptive statistics. As I mentioned, in terms of confidence, 24% have about 24% they say that they have a negative perception about the next year's sale. 26% say that no change, and about 49% say it increased. In terms of political connection, 7.7% say that they have a connection. And this is the statistics for other variables. We run the order probit regression because our dependent variable is +1, 0, and -1. And we apply the order probit regression with robust standard errors run by my co-authors. And what we found? We found that those firms, so no matter we include the external factors or internal factor or combination of them, sales expected to increase for firms who have political connection, and the increase is about 10 percentage point. The result is same when we include or exclude the internal or external factors. We almost get similar results across the different estimations. And back to that. When we include the business association in the model, the impact of political connection on business confidence slightly decrease. It means that business association can mediate this link. So what we found, managers and owners of politically connected firms in the MENA countries tend to have more positive outlook on their future sales. It's expected, but never been tested in the literature. Most of the existing literature focus on the tangible outcomes, right? And we support the income smoothing hypothesis of Chen and et al. Our result is extending the literature on the impact of political connections on the firm's activities in the MENA regions, especially Professor Divan's works on MENA. So in short, we find that politically connected firms tend to have a positive outlook on the futures. So probably it happens through the access to greater resources, insider information, extensive networks, and the ability to impact the regulations. So these are the channels that we found. And what is the implications? Of course, having a politician on board increase your sale in the future, but we should not forget that only 7% of them they benefit. The rest will suffer from the lack of having the politician on board. So the MENA countries tend, if they want to improve their economic activities and benefit, a microphone. To mitigate the cost imposed by politically connected firms on the broader economy, this group should advocate for greater transparency in the employment of politicians and their activities by firm. And our finding also illustrate how chronic capitalism skew economic outcome by benefiting politically connected firms, which is supporting Divan's work. And in terms of commercial perspective, our result is not only for policymakers. For commercial perspective, if supplier of the input know that those politically connected firms can have larger sale in the coming years, they can target them to sell the inputs to them. So our result has an implication for policymakers and also for commercials. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
attention.
Thank you, Hassan. Thank you, Hassan, for being on time.
On time?
I think so. That's my job. I'm supposed to. Yeah. We are on time. The third paper is from also a regional paper, which I personally find very, very interesting. Its title, Youth, Not in Education, Employment or Training in North Africa, Do Household Structure, Subjective Factors and Political Dimensions Affect NEET Outcome Differently by Gender. The authors are Aomar Ibourk and Zakaria Elouaourti. What? Elouaourti, yeah. So, please. And you are? Zakaria. Okay, so you know your name.
Assalamu alaikum. It's a great pleasure to be here today. My name is Zakaria Elouaourti, and I'm an assistant professor of economics at the Mohammad V University in Morocco. I will be presenting a paper that I have co-authored with Professor Aomar Ibourk. The paper title is Youth Not in Education, Employment or Training in North Africa. Do household structure, subjective factor, and political dimension affect NEET outcome differently by gender? As you know, youth represent the gold mine for any nation development, but without adequate support and opportunity, they can also become its Achilles heel. Nowadays, youth journey have become tougher, carrying out more risks than ever before. And this is especially true for the NEET category, whose circumstances magnify these challenges due to their accumulated skills and deficit in education, training, and soft skills. So in this context, youth socioeconomic inclusion remain a global challenge, particularly for our region. So in this presentation, I will share with you the main finding of our paper and also suggest some ways to support needs in our region. So my presentation is structured into 6 main parts. First, I will start by presenting the conceptual framework of our study that to help frame the issue. Secondly, I will present some studies of fact to help characterize and highlight the scale of the problem in North Africa. After that, I will present a bibliometrics analysis of this topic to justify the relevance of our research question and also highlight the main contribution of our study. After that, I will present the data, the methodology, the empirical results, and the discussion. And I will conclude by presenting some policy implication and acknowledge some limitation of our study. But to start, let's clarify what we mean by NEETs. NEETs stand for Not in Education, Employment, and Training. It's referred to young people who are both excluded from the education system and the labor market. We found also similar terms like excluded youth, youth on the margin, inactive youth, or the lost generation. All these synonyms point to the same vulnerable group. But in practice, to qualify an individual as a NEET, we need to consider 3 key elements. The first one, a specific age group that often varies. Secondly, the criteria that we use to define this individual as a NEET. And thirdly, the data source and the methodology we use. For example, this flowchart proposed by Holmes in his paper in 2021 provide a clear pathway to identify an individual as a NEET. He considered 4 conditions. First one, this individual should not be employed. Secondly, not attending any training scheme. Third, not participating in or not attending, not engaged in any apprenticeship. And finally, not attending any training or education course. If one of these conditions is missing, we cannot consider this individual as a NEET. The risk of falling within this category become more higher for certain specific group, like homeless youth, teenager parent, youth involved in delinquency, or youth substance abuser. These groups face additional barrier to hinder their engagement in education and employment, which increase the risk of becoming NEETs. Let's now take a look on the situation of the NEETs youth in North Africa. As you can see, according to the International Labour Organization, youth NEETs rates are alarmingly higher in North Africa and Arab states. For North Africa, 31%. In 2023, 31% from youth fall within this category, meaning that they were they were not working, not studying, not attending any training, which this is why many researchers and policymakers consider this category like a lost generation, or even more like time bomb. And as you can see that North Africa is the second region around the world, followed after what? The Arab state, making the Arab state and North Africa the highest region around the world of this category. Looking more closely to the rate of the needs category by comparing North African country and Arab state. As you can see that North African country display a moderate rate of needs phenomena. But even with these figures, the situation is critical if we consider these numbers in absolute value. For example, from my home country, Morocco, according to the highest Commission of Planning, the 25% of youth needs translate to around 1.5 million youth who are not studying, not working, not in any training scheme. Secondly, if we take, for example, the Egypt, the 24% translate to around 5.9 million youth in the same category, which point to the seriousness of the situation and which call to rigorous policy implication to support these needs. Now, what are the main reason or the main cause of this situation according to the literature? In principle, we can classify the main causes in three key categories. The first one is school dropout between primary and lower secondary due to insufficient alternative for students in dropout or for children in dropout situation. Secondly, the difficult transition between school or education system and the labor market caused by insufficient access to intermediation services. And finally, the insufficient support and care, particularly for the higher group risk. All these main causes or all these factors lead to a certain number of negative impact that I classified on 4 points. The first one is the highest reintegration risk to the education, employment, or the training pathway. Secondly, increased risk of social deviation and problem that may lead to increase in crime and social exclusion. Thirdly, the loss of human capital, given that most of youth needs miss out on essential skills and education. And finally, which lead to the lower or the non-contribution of this category to the economy. So, from a theoretical perspective, we can find a lot of theory that explain this phenomena. For example, if we take the human capital theory, needs may lack sufficient education and skills, limiting employability. A second theory, which is the cumulative disadvantage theory, stipulates that youth needs face many life setbacks that compound over time, like poverty, poor schooling, or a health issue that compound over time, leading to increased marginalization. But to understand the growing importance of this topic in the literature, we have conducted a bibliometrics analysis. What we found is quite telling, that since 1919, there has been an increase in the number of publications on these topics. But this sustained level of scientific production show, first, the seriousness of the problem. Secondly, it shows that in recent year, 13 articles per year, that this field have reached a certain level of maturity. But by analyzing all this literature, the 218 publications in the Web of Science, we have found that most of this literature focus on Western and higher income country, with the fact that the North African region is not covered in this literature, and this is where our study offers its first contribution by shedding light on this issue. In this region, one of the region that is underexplored in the literature, despite having one of the highest youth needs around the world. In terms of thematic evolution, our bibliometrics analysis show that the needs, our thematic evolution showed that a significant shift in the way needs are studied over time. As you can see that in the early 19, most of the study focused on what? Education as a main factor that explained this phenomena. But in recent years, we have seen a remarkable broadening of the research agenda. Researchers start to look beyond just education by exploring new socioeconomic and personal factors, like, for example, unemployment, skills development, and also personality traits and life satisfaction. Regarding focus, zooming now to the North African countries, most of the literature on the North African country agree on two main results: that the needs phenomena in North Africa is a common for youth, rural youth, and also that the women are more exposed to this phenomena than men. But most of this literature remain descriptive or focus on single country case study. This is where our study came to fill the gap in the literature by moving beyond traditional determinant, by integrating new dimensions that explain this phenomena, by using an individual level database that is on more than 70,000 North African youth with a regional perspective, which make the practical implication drawn from our analysis grounded in the real life macroeconomic circumstances of this individual. So, in sum, in addressing our main research question, the main objective was to identify the key factors that affect the needs outcome in three dimensions. The first one is the subjective dimension, the lowest one. The second one is the household dimension, and after that, the broader contextual framework with the political dimension. We have extracted our database from the Sahwa database, and by using a binary choice model of Logitip with the following specification, these are the main variables that we have leveraged. So, in terms of results, our study pointed out that youth in urban area are less likely to be needs. Education is not always protective, particularly for men. On the positive side, having more employed household members reduce the needs likelihood. In addition, higher self-esteem lower the risk of being needs. Also, youth club membership significantly reduced needs probability. The estimate on the country level showed the same pattern as the regional level estimation. So, from our empirical analysis, we have identified three main category of factors that require focus the policy attention. The first one is the causal factor. The rural-urban divide is significant. Rural youth face additional barrier to their engagement in the labor market and also in the education system. So we should expand education and employment opportunity to rural area. Another clear issue is the education and employment mismatch. So we should, policymakers should align the demand of the labor market to the output from the education system. We have proposed also that youth club, we have proposed also to expand youth club and community engagement to help youth build their soft skills, fostering also peer support, which will prepare them to the labor market. Also, rebuilding trust in institutions through governance, transparency, and accountability may encourage you to participate in the political and the economic life. Finally, the associated but non-causal factor, these are the subjective factor. We did not draw policy implication from this factor because the causal link is not clear. Being a need with a lower self-esteem may influence and be influenced by the needs phenomena. This is what we did not use these group of factors. We have, finally, we have categorized all results in three main actions. First one, the proximity, by bringing employment services closer to people, by making job support, counseling, and training accessible to all everywhere. Secondly, by decentralizing services and adapt them to the needs of each group, especially rural youth and women. Thirdly, by supporting service provider, enriching those facing the greatest barrier particularly higher group risk. And finally, the identification by establishing a system to identify the NEET youth early and provide them with the necessary support they need. Before concluding, I will take a moment to acknowledge a few limitations of our study. The first one is related to the data limitation, given that we have leveraged a relatively dated database, the Sahwa database 2016. Second limitation is the reverse causality issue, given that we have used some subjective factor to explain our dependent variable. I provided recently an example that lower self-esteem may influence and be influenced by the NEET statute. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Zakaria. So apparently now you have to listen to me for 30 minutes. I don't feel the excitement. So anyway, so I'll try to make my discussant comments as brief as possible. I enjoyed reading the 3 papers, so thank you so much. Quite relevant in terms of their implications on the region, given the political climate we're in, and obviously the post-Trump 2.0 that has more economic implications on the region that I think we will, personally, I think we will suffer quite substantially in the coming days, and obviously it would have implications on the middle class and the youth and the way businesses operate in the region. So I'll start with the first paper on the international sanctions on Iran. It's a very comprehensive paper in studying the implications on Iran. So the paper investigates the impact of international economic sanctions, particularly post-2012, on the size of the middle class in Iran, using the SCM, the synthetic control method, which I find a very interesting method. I work a lot on randomized control trials, so in my mind this looks like another type of randomized control trial. So by constructing a counterfactual scenario to estimate what the trajectory of Iran middle class might have been in the absence of a transaction. That the findings suggest that a significant decline of 11 percentage points in the middle class population by 2012 to 2019, and they look at the channels and mechanism through which this decline happens, including the GDP per capita, merchandise imports, and different. The contribution of the study, obviously, it looks at the literature that is out there that looks at the socio-economic consequences of sanctions. There are different things that look at the macroeconomic shocks. I have a lot of literature there. I'll be happy to share it with the authors. But what this paper does is that it looks at the meso-level outcome, which is the middle class, which is the expansion of which is linked to democratization, economic stability. So I think the raison d'etre of the sanction were to impact the stability of the regime in Iran and the long-term growth. It's one of the good methodologies that are used, the SCM, in this kind of literature that kind of identify the causal claims compared to the traditional difference and difference. That could have been also another methodology that... So I think the methodology is rigorous. It kind of satisfies the research question. It's obviously it adds to the political economy literature that looks at the impact of middle class on democratization and overall economic development. So it's very important to that. Now the points that I think could be useful to my personal view for the authors to consider if they want is I think the literature engagement could be more profound and broader. There is I found a couple of citations that I relate to the distribution effect of these sanctions, and I think particularly there are 2 citations that are important. I think you should elaborate on them more. The Peskin 2009 and Leo and others 2021. I think they're important papers, and I think you should discuss them further and how they relate to your paper. Obviously, the issue of endogeneity, your methodology controls for the observable and time invariant unobservable, but you can elaborate on the potential role of endogenous political shift after 2012 and how might affect the middle class dynamics. I think it's the point that I think could be useful to your paper is an external validity. How do you think these results could be duplicated or extrapolated to other cases of economic sanctions such as Venezuela, Russia, and so on? Obviously, I'm sure you're going to get this from any reviewer, the fixed PPP as a definition of the middle class. You should, I think, address it in your paper that there are obviously other non-economic subjective measures of the middle class that are context specific. I'm confident that a reviewer of the paper will tell you how context specific is the definition of middle class to Iran and so on. In Egypt, we have this dilemma of what is a middle class? Is it income? Is it education? And so on? Is it urban? And I think you might consider that. There is a couple of paper, an old one by Quran in 1995 that talks about political behavior of the middle class under economic stress. So maybe this is could be useful to you. You mentioned in your presentation there is another paper that looks at the inequality measure. Did I hear that correctly? Okay, so that was actually one of my suggestions to do another SCM on the inequality measures like the Gini to reinforce your findings. The one thing I would suggest, I don't know if it's possible given the data that you have, is to look at are these effects heterogeneous? Are certain demographic groups affected more than the middle class than this? And to what extent? Urban versus rural or so on. The one thing you've based your definition on the middle class based on the paper by Kharas 2017. I didn't find it in the literature, in the bibliography of the paper. I don't know if I missed it or it's, but is this the working paper from the Global Economy and Development? Okay. Personally, I think you should substantiate the definition by other sources because I think any reviewer would second guess this as a choice of because the whole paper is based on this definition. So I think you enrich the literature review by adding other metrics of the middle class. I know you used the survey at the end, but I think that's the other thing I wasn't sure of is the weights that you use for the synthetic Iran. I didn't see in the paper how you defended the weights in each country, so I think you should provide some justification of why the weights should be there. I didn't see the price of oil in the independent variables. I don't know if this is relevant to the synthetic country because some of the composites of the synthetic countries are countries that are oil exporting, and given that Iran is oil exporting. And also I think what matters also for countries that are, whether the real Iran or the synthetic Iran, is the economic growth globally, because it impacts so I don't know if that is something you want to consider. Two more things. Yes, I wonder if this is doable or not, but I thought of it, especially now it reinforced my thought when I saw the graph of the impact on the middle class every year. I'm wondering if the impact of the sanction takes time over year and year. So would you consider some sort of temporal effect of the sanctions? So whether it increases across time, because I don't know, remember the graph that you showed? It's important to investigate whether the impact is strongest in the last year and then weaker in the first year. Is there a way to do that? Because I would argue that the impact is maybe a shock in the beginning and then the economy readjusts, but at a longer time it becomes the effect much stronger. And so that's the last thing. I think another assumption that I think you need to defend more is the assumption that you assume that the upper middle class movement from the upper middle upper class to the middle class is smaller than the movement from the middle class to the lower class. And it's based on literature in developed countries. So I don't know, because the basic claim is that the middle class has shrank, but it could be also that the middle class has remained the same through the movement from upper class to the middle class. I don't know if I made myself clear. But rather than that, this is the first paper. Do I go on for the second and third one, or yeah? Okay. You didn't get them? So, the second one is the paper on the politicians on the board of firms on the MENA countries. The paper investigates the impact of political connections on firm perception of their business sales prospects in the Middle East and North Africa, using firm level data from the World Bank Enterprise Survey and using a methodology of ordered logic. The authors find that the firms with former politicians or politically connected individuals on their board report higher confidence in their future sales. The positive effect is stronger with countries with lower level of democracy and weaker institutions. The analysis is also robust to alternative measures and control variables. So it contributes to the literature on political connections. It's a very rich literature, and obviously because apparently our region, this is where this kind of literature kind of shines and finds a lot of data to work with. It adds to understanding of the political influence. And the contribution is that it used the firm perception of sales other than accurate. There are obviously a lot of literature, you mentioned Ishaq Diwan, on the effect of the stock market, effect on the sales and so on. But this is, to the best of my knowledge, this is the only paper that addresses their own firm perceptions of their future sales. Obviously, it's a subjective firm level data, and there is a considerable amount of robustness checks in the paper. I think the paper could use more of robustness check, especially that the independent variable is a subjective measure of perception. So there is a lot of error in the data for sure. It's a very relevant paper to the private sector development in the Middle East and North Africa for obvious reasons. Now, obviously, I think you have addressed this in the presentation. Obviously, the endogeneity concern is very strong, and I think you need to address it very clearly because, at least in our region, one could claim, or at least in Egypt, one could claim that the firms that have better prospect or think positively of their future attract political interference and attract political connections rather than the other way around. Now, I think you should address the fact that could be also some sort of measurement issue. They're self-reported, so there could be an incentive to under-reporting and strategic misreporting. The other thing, I know this is the data that you have, but a lot in the literature uses relatives of political connections. Whether they are in board or in managerial positions, you actually use the actual connection, the person himself or herself. So I don't know if the data that you used has, whether the person has a relative in the political authority or not. Only one question, yes, for obvious reasons. There is a lot of papers on political capture and clientism. Obviously, Ashimoglu and Robinson have a lot of work on this, so I think you should address that in the literature. Given the endogeneity, I would suggest using an instrumental variable, whether a certain policy, tariffs on certain groups. You should address, obviously, the seminal work of Vishny on corruption and political economy of corruption that is there. Are these perceptions homogeneous across the size of the firm and the industry? So maybe you want to control to that, whether the effect is the same for different industries. again, the self-selection, I think should address the possibility that more successful firms self-select into hiring politically connected board members, whether or not this effect is stronger for certain sectors like energy, construction, and so on. And I presume the data that you have doesn't have sales volume, right? So you cannot do a robustness check. No, okay. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. One question is, why didn't you include the United Arab Emirates? Possibly because it's not in the data? Oh, okay. For obvious. Yeah. And you mentioned that in the presentation. This is a cross section. You don't have data across time, so obviously that's, I think, a limitation. Thank you. So, am I done? No, there is one more. Okay. Oh, this one I really like, the paper on the youth. Obviously, very strong implication on our region. Very, very important study of this subsection of our youth that is either not working, not training, and not in education. I think you mentioned the word time bomb, and I completely agree. It is a time bomb. The paper examines the determinants of youth NEET status in North Africa, focusing on how household structure, subjective factors, and political dimensions affect by gender. So this is countries covering Morocco, Egypt, Tunisia, and Algeria, and using a legit method. And the main finding, obviously, that the urban residence, whether the person lives in urban, reduces the likelihood of the person being a NEET. And obviously, it reestablishes what we call the youth paradox in the MENA region, that the more educated you are, the higher the probability of being an... I think this is across the years since I was a graduate student, this paradox has been established and reinforced across time, and every time we say it has policy implications, and very little people do anything about it. So the household structure, the family support, the satisfaction, all of these impact the NEET outcomes. Obviously, no surprise to anyone, the gender differences and it's very clear and very consistent. This study contributes to literature by including individual level determinants such as subjective factors and political factors to determine the discourse on NEET, and it indicates the inequalities in the education market and the labor market in the MENA region. So that it's a very good data set. It's unfortunate it's old. Yeah, so it's 10 years now. Update, yeah. Because I wrote down it's an old data set. It's almost 10 years now. A lot of things happen in these 10 years. I think the pandemic have definitely impacted that. Obviously, again, the issue of with the second paper, subjective measures that are reported are very contain a lot of error in measurement. So that's something you should address in the paper, in my view. Again. There is a causality concern between being the subjective well-being and being a NEET, obviously, of course. So I think this is, you should definitely address that in the paper. We discussed the measurement validity. I think the theoretical frameworks could benefit from the theoretical frameworks in the economics literature. There's a lot on that, and I'm happy to share a few citations that I pulled up. I think there is also space for robustness checks using alternative specification and subgroups. And I have a few questions to that, but so we talked about the reverse causality, and you can specify, I mean, it's probably a data limitation, what kind of political participation they are asked and how can they engage in that. And I think what could be useful is because this is a cross-section to look at the difference between urban and rural across countries, particularly for countries that have a large agricultural sector like Egypt. And there is something I wasn't sure if it's a typo I misunderstood. The migration numbers in the first page, they seem quite small.
No, these are the net migration.
But it's like 4,000 or 10,000.
For example, I think it's on average.
It seems to me that in a country like Egypt, there is only 9,000 net migration.
But this is the net migration, the difference between.
It seems to me like a small, very small number. I don't know. I didn't.
And I have even cited the source.
Okay. I doubted it, frankly speaking, so I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much all. So I am 5 minutes ahead of time. That's good. I'm very efficient. And now I open the floor for questions. Should we do them by paper or general questions? Yeah, sure. Okay. Can you please introduce yourself and then address which paper you want to talk? I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Atallah. I'm the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies and Research at the Onsi Sawira School of Business at the American University in Cairo. Yeah. So, the first question.
Yes. Thank you, Samer. I'm Shahir Zaki from the University of Orléans and the Economic Research Forum. Thank you for the three presentations. I have two questions for the first paper by Mohammad and the second paper by Hassan. Where is Hassan? Oh, yes. Yes, so first, for the first paper regarding the synthetic group that you are using, did you consider just the, just the structural characteristics of the countries without introducing the other controls like the GDP, government spending, and other determinants, in the sense that just focusing on, let's say, the institutional variables in addition to the natural resources, rents, and all the variables that just consider the structure of the economies, not other macro variables? That's a very small question. And then for Hassan, we actually working on a very similar paper with my colleague Nora Bouchedi and Marcus also. We got his brilliant feedback on the paper. We're going to present this paper tomorrow, and we are using exactly the same variables to see whether political connections they affect global value chain integration in the MENA region or not. And when we contrast the different variables of lobbying, corruption, etc., the systematic finding was that the only variable that really matters in the MENA region is political connections. So, actually the lobbying variable didn't really work, yes. And I was wondering to what extent the result of the lobbying or the business associations in general, you're using them as a mediating variable, while in most of those countries, business associations, they are not really effective in the sense that either they are fragmented or marginalized by political connections. So I don't really get how it can be used as a mediating variable to explain political, because at the end of the day, from my perspective, I think that political connections can be considered as a mediating variable to affect expectations, because that's really at the end of the day what matters for most of the businesses. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we take two more questions and then, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much to all the presenters. My name is Wissam Elbey. I'm the Regional Director for IDRC for the Middle East and North Africa. I have a couple of questions. The first is for the third presenter. And it will come as no surprise. I always look for the policy implications. So you have clearly shown as part of the findings that marginalized population, like people with disabilities and even women, are more kind of susceptible to being NEET. However, we didn't see at the end policy implications that or recommendations that are gender sensitive or that is addressing marginalized population. So if you can comment on that. And my second question is for the second presenter, also about whether you make any recommendations with regards to governance, addressing, you know, the kind of the perks of having political figures or people who have access to influencing policies also is kind of double-edged and might have implications over corruption and governance-related issues. Thank you.
We'll take one more question.
Thank you so much. Abu Hatab from Uppsala University in Sweden. And I actually have two questions, one for the first paper and the second paper as well. For the first paper, I like the idea very much. We have a very similar paper focused on Libya. And it's now under review. And we got two comments which may be relevant and helpful. The first one was actually related to what happens. You know, we understand that there is a negative relationship between the sanctions and the size, what you call the size of the middle class. And then one of the comments was, okay, so why did not you track this to see where this decrease has ended up? I see one of your slides where you compare your results against another paper, and the assumption here is that those who migrated or were pushed from the middle class ended up in the lower class. But this is not necessarily the case, and this is what we have found in our paper. And we actually tried to interpret this by going to the risk literature, which shows that risk by default is an event which may provide opportunities, but also negative impacts. So looking into where they ended up can provide a lot of useful political and policy implications, because it has to do also with corruption and this kind of unstable environment, which can offer opportunities for some segment of this middle class. So this is one. Can I have one more question for the second paper? Yeah, I also like this presentation very much, but I was not sure if you accounted in your analysis for the size of the firm, the location, and the ownership structure. Because ownership structure in our data, I can share with you some of our papers published on this, like we see when firms, especially in the Middle East, when they are owned or by foreign entities or shared ownership, then the impact of political connection seems to be absorbed by having or being affiliated or related to a foreign country where, you know, you see my point?
Yes, I got it.
Yeah.
So if we include the size.
Okay, so now I'll take another round, but I want to leave the opportunity for authors to answer. So,
Yeah, thank you very
Mohammad.
much. Yeah, just I just noted all your points.
Okay.
But very quickly on the definition of middle class, of course, we have updated the paper by arguing why this absolute measure of kharas is proper, and we also discussed the disadvantage of using the relative measure of middle class, in which the effect of sanction could be hidden because it's a function of medium income, and when the medium income drops, so the percentage of below and upper medium income, the size might not change during the sanction, the percentage of population, but these relative definition of middle class might fall below these $11 and you are poor in the vulnerable population, but still in that context you are counted as a middle class in the relative definition. So relative definition is not something that is helpful in this context. And another advantage of Kharas database is because it provides the size of middle class before and after sanction, a good number of years before the sanction from 1996 to 2012 and 2012 to 2019, not only for Iran but also for all countries that we are using. So this cross-country comparison is a very good thing in this approach. Nevertheless, as I mentioned, we also look at the narrower definition of this threshold from $10 to $40 in purchasing power parity, and the results are quite similar in that sense. So that part is very much updated in the new version. We have extended the paper. On the endogeneity, we are not worried about that because we are matching Iran, synthetic Iran, before the 2012 sanctions. So the sanctions are not affecting those characteristics, and we are predicting the synthetic Iran after that. So in that sense, the reverse feedback, which might be the case in other cases, is very less likely to be the case. On the Shahir comments on the which characteristic we use to match Iran, first of all, we are trying to narrow our region to find the counterfactual. So we're focusing on the MENA countries, OPEC countries, oil, and members of Islamic organizations. So we are not going for global donor in a way that you have country from sub-Saharan Africa or somewhere, which is difficult to justify the inclusion. So in that sense, that helps to basically defend these countries. The optimization, we have provided more details, again, the updated version on the methodology, so how this nested optimization is basically is helpful and where these weights are coming to increase the fit of the model before the sanctions. Externality I have not done, maybe, I'm not sure if for Venezuela, but if you have done for Libya, that is already decrease is shown. We are arguing that this decrease in the size of middle class is going downwards to vulnerable population. The mechanism on the informal employment vulnerable population that I provide here is supporting that. They are not moving up, they are rather going down. And the world value survey is also additional evidence that the people identify themselves in which social class they belong. 2005, before the sanction, 2020, under the sanction, it is clear down. The rich are very much resilient against the sanctions. The poor were poor before the sanction. They probably become more poorer. After the sanction, this is the middle class, which either immigrate, because my colleague sits there, Jörg Gottman also has a paper on sanction and immigration. They found the causal effect of sanction on out-migration. Part of this middle class number reduces because they left the country and the rest goes down. But it's very less likely that they join the rich club of things, and world value survey might be a qualitative support of this argument. The literature could be, the literature is also updated in the recent one, but I would be happy to get your comments on the new study that you mentioned. Cumulative effect, long-term effects, definitely that is something that we see in single year over the time. You know how in 2019 it was the peak of these negative effects under the Trump sanction, which was maximum pressure. That shows this adjustment to the sanction is less likely to be seen here because these negative effect on middle class become much more stronger in 2019 over time.
I think what I was trying to ask, is it because the 2012 sanctions or the 2019 is the effect? Well, I guess my question is the effect of the sanction consistent across time?
Most of the sanction that Trump built on that was the oil sanction, and so was already exercised under the Obama, and he just make it more stricter, right, under the maximum pressure campaign, and try to identify the ways that Iran was bypassing the sanction under the Obama. So those loopholes in the system. So he increased the intensity of the sanction, but the type of sanction, oil embargo, and so was this. I guess the other points I just noted, and I'll be happy to. So thank you very much.
So there was a question on the policy implication.
Yes, the policy implications that are gender sensitive. But before thank you. Before responding to the question of about sensitive gender policy, I will start by a certain number of comments that you have raised, Mr. Amer. The first comment regarding the dated, Mr. Samer, regarding the data, which is a relatively dated database. Yeah. So when we were addressing our research question, we had two main goals. The first one is finding a database that will allow us to have this regional perspective. The second one, find the correct database that contain the relevant variables that will allow us to construct our dependent variable. As I explained earlier in my presentation, that the needs variable or the dependent variable is should be considered with 4 conditions. This is why, to our knowledge, the only database that we have found is the one about the Sahwa. But even this problem of the age of the database, the rural-urban divide, and also the education mismatch is still relevant today. So the result that we have drawn from our analysis is still relevant today. Regarding the other question about the methodology, I agree with you that we should conduct additional robustness check. Why not consider working with another methodology like instrumental variable probit, or why not consider a randomized control trial to isolate the causal impact or the causal effect of, for example, subjective variables on the needs category. Regarding the question about the gender-sensitive policy implication, I agree with you. We did not integrate this kind of policy. Why? Because if you read our paper, we did not find significant difference between men and men regarding the determinant of being needs. This is why we proposed general policy implication that are relevant for all the strata of our database. But maybe, inshallah, in our future papers, we will consider this proposition. Thank you.
The question of Hassan.
First, thank you so much for taking your time to read our paper. The indigeneity issue, yes, we have to address it by choosing one instrumental variable. It's difficult to find the instrument in that database, but we will think about that. Thank you. And regarding your comments about the legal status of the firms, we include so many control variables. No matter which type of control variable we include, the relationship between political connection and sentiment stay there. But certainly, I will check. I include that in my model and run it again and make sure that's. Shai, regarding your comments, the literature mostly was around the mediating impact of the business association, but your point is correct, actually. So I have to look whether I have to put political connection as a mediator, business sentiment as an independent variables. But literature mostly was around choosing business association as a mediator. And regarding your, yes, we provided some implication for policymakers, but the government are the part of the problem themselves, so we cannot we cannot ask them to correct themselves. But yes, we have an implication part in our paper. Thank you so much.
Another round of questions, so we have a lot to. So
Thank you.
And then Marania, and then the gentleman here, and the gentleman.
All right. Thank you for your excellent presentation. Ali Faki, a professor of applied economics, Lebanese American University in Beirut. So, question number one for Mohammad. So there are a number of evidence showing that there's no effect between sanction and some economic outcome, including a recent paper published a few years ago on sanction and export in Iran, showing that there is no causal effect. It's a seminal paper published, I forget the journal. So how we can link your results to the existing results on Iran specifically? And for Zakaria, really I enjoy your paper also. So for Sahwa Youth Survey, it has a number of problems. It's not because it's outdated, but for labor market variables, many variables they are missing. So we have missing values. I don't know if you face this problem. And second, did you use the weight? Because the problem, I remember in Sahwa survey, results may change substantially if they are weighted or non-weighted. I didn't notice also, did you run the results by country or aggregate results? Because it may matter substantially. And finally, very quick question for Hassan. So what could be the take-away message for policymakers? So if you want to just provide one recommendation, so to change the politician, to improve the institution, shared governance, so one take-away message. Thank you.
I don't want to change
Hassan, we'll take more questions. Rania?
Yes, thank you. Rania, AUC, American University, and Population Council. Also, the same question as Ali's question regarding the Sahwa data, because I was also part of that. Like you mentioned two things. First, you need to think how you're going to really adjust for indigeneity or solve for the indigeneity issue. With the Sahwa, I don't think you have enough opportunity to do that. But you said there is no other data to measure the need. Like there is many data to measure the need. The Egypt Labor Market Panel Survey will help you with that. The survey of young people, you can measure the need. You also have the Egypt labor market. You have it in Jordan and you have it in Tunisia. So maybe think about skipping the other two countries that you don't have enough data for, and try to replicate the data with some of these surveys. Maybe and see if the results will change a little bit. But think about that. Thank you. And even for the political, and even with the, maybe Sahwa is helpful with the political questions, but you have some of that in the survey of young people as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Side piece, right?
Yeah,
Thank you,
Thank you very much. Just I want to address to Hassan second paper. When you quoted the Italian author, you remind me the experience of Italy, especially in the area of Berlusconi, who were involved in every business. For this reason, I think it's better to take control of the power of politicians and use, instead of political connection, maybe another less smooth concept. I think also the indigeneity problem matters. But for the politicians, did you take account of the category of politicians or just politicians close to the government? Did you take account of opponents or something like that? Or
the question is, as Shahir is aware of that, there is one question whether your board of members have been in the ruling government in the past or no. So unfortunately, there are not many questions, the type of, the quality of the position, no.
yeah. And do you think it's a good news, your result, for many countries or not?
So generally, political connection has a lot of benefit for those
Yeah.
companies. But our suggestion was to enhance the transparency around having the politician on board. So they need to announce it, right? So not like a politician in 3-4 terms ago, now they employed as a board member and they benefit this symmetric information. So there should be some regulation to announce and be transparent whether they have a political connection or not.
Thank you.
The gentleman here. The gentleman in the right.
Just a couple of questions for the first paper. I'm a bit surprised to see Qatar as part of the counterfactual, apart from size, which bears no similarity to a big country like Iran, and also the point raised by Shahir about wider socioeconomic structure. If you take the range $10 to $110, I find the $10 at the bottom level very low, and I'll tell you in a minute why I think so, and 110 almost too high. The 110 in Iran is a lot of money, especially given the currency depreciation. Yeah, even so, given the currency depreciation, yeah. But the $10, if you go back to Qatar, it's not clear to me whether the data in Qatar includes the 90% of the population which are non-Qataris or not. The Qatari population is only 10%, 300,000, which is a tiny fraction of a large Iranian city, single city. So I find this counterintuitive to feature as part of your counterfactual. And in fact, did you do some kind of sensitivity analysis dropping one of these 7 or 8 countries in the counterfactual to see if it makes any difference? I didn't see that. And the $10, and if I may explain why I find the $10 especially low in Qatari context, the $10 is actually the minimum wage. If you include $10 in the lower end definition of middle class, you are including a large group of low-paid migrant workers in Qatar as part of middle class, which is totally counterintuitive. Who remains outside the middle class? So I find that particular example a bit questionable. Last but not least, the paper is interesting, but it also misses out on explaining the mechanism, the vehicle, how sanctions impact on the size of the middle class. And we know that it is through currency depreciation, currency nosediving every time sanctions started biting, both in October 2012, time of Obama, and also May, June 2018, when Trump walked away from the JCPOA. And through that, the impact is on inflation. It's persistent inflation. And in fact, if you look at the behavior of inflation in Iran, it beats your counterfactuals hands down. You don't even need a counterfactual group. Basically, that's what describes the uniqueness of Iran's macro experience in the last 10, 15 years across the MENA region.
Yeah, a quick one. Perhaps I think in the counterfactuals, perhaps you've done it, but perhaps you can exclude Qatar and Tunisia and just limit the counterfactual to Nigeria, Azerbaijan, and Malaysia in the sense that they are countries that belong to another region with completely different, let's say, common characteristics, in the sense that they are not, they will not be affected through the same external shocks, but Nigeria, Azerbaijan, and Malaysia, Africa, Asia, and Asia as well for Malaysia, I think it will be perhaps one of the robustness checks to, and again by focusing on just the structural characteristics. Thank you.
Sorry, in all cases, and I think it goes back to what I said, in all cases there has to be some sort of strong justification for the choice of these countries. It could go by elimination, that this is a list of countries that have possibly similar socio-economic economic structure as Iran, but we're eliminating this by this and this.
I mean, there is of course, the regional.
No, I was supposed to speak here, but.
Shall I? So thank you, Hassan, for very beautiful comments on the mechanism. In the working paper is not that much elaborated. In the updated one, I show some of these results. You saw 5, 6 other outcomes from informal employment, vulnerable population, industrial value-added capital fixed capital formation, GDP, real GDP adjusted for inflation. So the income loss of $3,600 per capita, which is already inflation is part of. I didn't try with the inflation because inflation is very volatile in Iran. So it's very volatile, and the model does not work well when the outcome is very volatile. So finding the match of Iran, the synthetic Iran, when the outcome has a like exchange rate or this kind of indicator is not working well. But implicitly, the role of inflation is on the outcome of real GDP per capita, and that might address also your concern on the role of inflation. Now, to find the synthetic Iran, of course, we need to decide on which region we need to focus, right? So, and we decided for cultural reason, institutional reason, to focus on MENA region, members of OPEC because of the role of oil in the structure of the economies, including Qatar. Yeah, but the oil is located in the MENA region, right? So, and then putting aside these other subjective evaluation why Qatar is, Iran is much more bigger or so was, so how we can address your point. So this leave one out analysis is a kind of sensitivity checks, which shows what will happen to the synthetic Iran if I exclude. So the main synthetic Iran, which I showed at the beginning, is the red line, right? So that is overlapping with the other. Now I exclude the synthetic Iran, excluding Qatar, which is this gray zone. So the gap is still there, right? So it's a little bit adjust, but this is without Qatar, this is with Qatar. A little bit reduced, right? So synthetic Iran excluding Tunisian is also very close to the initial main synthetic Iran. Excluding Nigeria, which is even bigger, so that means when I exclude Nigeria, even this gap increases a little bit. So there is no, let's just say, overestimation of initial gap. Even one say if we exclude the Nigeria, there would be underestimation of the effect to some extent. Excluding Malaysia, again, the red line, which is exactly matched to the main effect. So this is basically showing that the results is not driven by a specific country in the donor sample. The weight of Qatar is also 30%.
You just confirm that if you leave out Qatar, not much happens. And Qatar is irrelevant, that's my point.
Yeah, I mean, but in a sense that from beginning I cannot exclude Qatar by this argument that it is irrelevant.
Then you cannot exclude.
No, but as you see, the excluding Qatar is... Yeah, that's good. You wanted to say, sure? Nader.
You just need to use the mic because it's...
Sure.
Sorry, I'm the co-author. Just Nader Habibi. Just an explanation. We did not subjectively select those countries. The process that takes place in the synthetic control method is an optimization process, which first you select a number of donors, a large pool, and from that pool, the optimization process chooses the best matches in terms of the countries that will remain in the sample. And that's how these 5 countries were selected. And if you notice, the result of that is the good match of the synthetic Iran and the real Iran all the way up to the year 2012. So it is not subjective.
Yes, thank you. And the key assumption is that none of these countries which are building synthetic Iran or donor group should not have the same experience of sanction, because otherwise would be biased. Not only sanction, but any other major conflict, war, and things, because we have excluded. Element 200, then this is purchasing power parity adjusted for inflation, exchange rate, and so on and so forth. I mean, we can, of course, criticize, whether this lower bound works in one country or other, but this is the global definition of middle class. And the idea is this lower band basically separate the middle class from vulnerable population. So the idea of Kharas is if you fall below $10 per day per capita, basically you have problem to basically have a kind of level of consumption that is expected from the middle class in a term of purchasing power. And in case of Iran, I agree with you that when we look at our voting data and look at the percentage of population below the $40 per day per person, so 90-something% of population in Iran are below that. So that means they never reach these things. But that's not basically, the importance is lower band. So whether it is $110 or $40, again, the results that we show it is very much similar as it is presented here. Also from the average percentage decline in the size of middle class. But of course, given the fact that he has this global definition of middle class, the upper bound is said, okay, he wants to exclude this rich population in which, at the end of the day, is not very much relevant play in case of example of Europe. So,
thank you. So one of my do you have? Okay, so I think I failed miserably as the chair in keeping time. Yeah. So to Rania, yes, Rania's point is very important.
Thank you very much for the second round of question. Regarding your question, Mr. about Sahwa database and the missing values. Sincerely, we conducted data cleaning, but we wanted that we work just on the available observation to not have a bias or to not bias our estimation, simply. Regarding your second question about the weight, honestly, we did not wait for the difference between the other countries. Instead of that, we have conducted estimation for both at the aggregate level by controlling with fixed effect of each country, and also by conducting country level estimation. I agree with you, Madam, about the homogeneity issue. Maybe in our future study we will consider using a more robust estimation like the instrumental variable, or why not randomized control trial. And finally, I would thank you for the suggestion about the database that I can use specifically by leveraging surveys or the census on this labor market issues. Thank you.
On the Ali, I forgot to mention. I mean, Ali, you said there is a study which shows that there is no negative effect of sanctions. Yeah, I'm not aware of that. Maybe you can say it. So the literature that maybe Hader, that is the Hader paper. Because of bypassing of sanctions or things like that. So the most, the most evidence in the literature shows about the negative impact of sanctions on different outcomes, right? So there is a discussion or a dispute on the effectiveness of sanctions, whether in the long term the behavior of the target country on the sanction will change because they adjust themselves, they find a way to bypass it and so on. But the general agreement is that there is a negative, and this negative effect is significant. Whether it's a short-term phenomenon or long-term phenomenon, that is something else. But in case of middle class, we found out that this continuous decrease of size of middle class decreased a little bit during the GCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2016-17, although that it remained still below the counterfactual Iran, but intensified again under the Trump sanctions. So maybe one interpretation is without the experience of dealing with the Obama, or the lessons that Iran learned from Obama sanctions, so the effect even was larger under the Trump sanction. That could be one interpretation. But generally the picture is negative, right? Whether that was effective to change the behavior of Iranian government in the case of nuclear program is another question, right? There is the effectiveness of the sanction, which is not the target or aim of this paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the authors and the presenters. Thank you for the audience for your patience. Thank you so much.